up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, early voting for next Wednesday's local elections is underway at some 3,500 polling stations across Korea. President Park Geun-hye warns that another North Korean nuclear test could spark a nuclear arms race in Northeast Asia. Plus, with Japan agreeing to lift its own sanctions on North Korea, U.S. and South Korean experts expressed concerns about the effectiveness of international efforts to press Pyongyang to give up its nuclear program. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Friday, May 30th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Ojin Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime. Koreans have been heading to the polls on this Friday as an early voting system that doesn't require prior registration has begun for the first time in Korea's local election history.
The new system has been adopted to help voters unable to cast their ballots next Wednesday, the actual election day. Our political correspondent Ji Myung-kil has more.
For the first time in Korea's local election history, a two-day long early voting period started this Friday. Without prior registration, voters can cast their ballots from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Korea time, if they are unable to make it on election day, June 4th.
I won't be able to vote on the actual day of the election, so I think this early voting system is very convenient.
Voters are only required to show their resident registration card to cast their ballot at any of the more than 3,500 polling stations set up across the nation. Electronic devices located in every polling booth recognize the barcode on the ID cards and take the fingerprints of voters. For added convenience, smartphone users can download an application that provides information on the locations of nationwide polling stations and the list of candidates in the local elections.
I think the early voting system is great for busy people as it does not require prior registration and you can vote as soon as you arrive without having to wait in a queue.
Officials from Korea's National Election Commission have been dispatched to each polling station to manage and monitor the voting process. And for both days, the commission will release voter numbers and the turnouts for each province, city, and district. Through the early voting system, Korea's National Election Commission expects the voter turnouts to be higher this time than the previous local election in 2010. Ji Myung-kil, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye has issued a stark warning. She says that if North Korea makes good on its threat to conduct a new form of nuclear test, it'll almost certainly trigger a nuclear arms race in the region. Park Ji-won tells us more.
President Park Geun-hye has warned another nuclear test by North Korea would have a huge impact on the security landscape in Northeast Asia. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal this week, President Park said a new test would have a domino effect with North Korea's neighbors feeling compelled to develop their own nuclear weapons to arm themselves against such a clear threat. She warned it would be difficult to prevent such a scenario from playing out as, quote, North Korea would effectively be crossing the Rubicon if they were to conduct another nuclear test. She added, a new test would also make the six-party talks on North Korea's denuclearization irrelevant. She said Seoul was closely cooperating with the other members of the six-party talks on a number of levels. The president singled out China's role in resolving the issue, as Beijing exerts huge influence on the regime. China is North Korea's biggest trade partner, accounting for 90% of the regime's external trade. She added that China has firmly expressed that it won't accept a nuclear North Korea and will take steps to deter Pyongyang from going ahead with another test. The South Korean leader promised to forge ahead with her trust-building policy with the North and seek out ways to boost inner Korean economic ties. North Korea threatened to conduct a fourth nuclear test in March, following its previous tests in 2006, 2009, and 2013. Satellite images indicate North Korea's nuclear test site has been active and a test could happen at any time. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
President Park also addressed the human rights conditions in North Korea, commending a UN Special Commission report on human rights abuses in the communist country, saying it's helped raise international awareness about the issue. During talks with visiting Commission Chairman Michael Kirby on Friday, President Park said the probe and recommendations made about the North Korean regime's crimes against humanity were a groundbreaking opportunity to address the problem. The president said a translated version of the report will be completed soon, which will hopefully inform South and North Koreans about the abuses being committed in the North on a daily basis.
North Korea has agreed with Japan to reopen a probe into its kidnapping of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. North Korea says that if it finds any surviving abductees, they will be returned to Japan. In return, Tokyo says it will lift some sanctions on North Korea and send the country humanitarian aid. Shin Se-min reports.
The agreement between Japan and North Korea to reopen an investigation on Japanese citizens abducted by the North decades ago represents a possible breakthrough in a bitter bilateral dispute. The move, however, touched off concerns that Tokyo's unilateral lifting of sanctions against North Korea could cripple international efforts to press Pyongyang to give up its nuclear programs.
Until the day comes that the families of those abductees can hold their children in their arms, our mission is not over. Since the beginning, we have been determined to pursue this goal and believe that this is a solid first step towards that.
In exchange, Tokyo's chief cabinet secretary told reporters that Japan would ease restrictions on North Korea and consider a resumption of humanitarian aid to Pyongyang.
We will look into canceling the special sanctions against North Korea and the sanctions against humanitarian vessels from North Korea to enter into Japan.
The international community has had a lukewarm reaction to the deal, including both South Korea and the U.S., which said a wrong message may be sent to Pyongyang. South Korean officials said the lifting of sanctions could have a negative impact on denuclearizing the North. The U.S. State Department spokesperson stressed the need for transparency in talks with the North. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Staying with a North Korea-related story, U.S. lawmakers are in the process of turning the screws on Pyongyang even tighter than they are now. A subcommittee within the House of Representatives unanimously passed a bill on Thursday that would strengthen existing sanctions on North Korea with the goal of preventing the North from further developing its nuclear and missile programs. The bill says the State Department should draw up a blacklist of North Korean officials who are the perpetrators of human rights abuses. It also suggests the president consider labeling the North as a nation that launders money. A clause which expands sanctions to third parties that do business with North Korea was not included.
And moving on, Japan and China will play out the next round of their bitter territorial dispute later on this Friday at a security forum in Singapore. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is expected to use his keynote speech to urge Japan's allies to work together to counter China's rapid military rise. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
At the three-day Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore this weekend, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will urge allies in the region to work together to counter the rise of China, while promoting a greater role for Tokyo in security matters. The call will come when the Japanese leader gives a keynote address this Friday evening, citing the heightened tensions in the South China Sea and East China Sea. Abe's top government spokesman said the speech would make the case for constructive discussions towards peace and safety. China has already expressed anger about the Abe administration's move to reinterpret its pacifist constitution. This speech will only stand to anger Beijing more. Led by Vice Foreign Minister Fu Ying, it's expected to describe Tokyo as a real threat to security. The summit involves the United States and ASEAN countries, including many that are involved in territorial disputes with China, like Vietnam and the Philippines. Japan and Beijing also have their own dispute, brewing over a set of disputed islands in the East China Sea. Attention will be paid to the response to Abe's call, as many ASEAN nations are hesitant to take any stance that may harm their economical and political ties with Beijing. In another discussion that is sure to draw the ire of China, the defense ministers of Korea, U.S., and Japan will meet on the sidelines of the dialogue for talks about beefing up missile defense cooperation in the region. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Lawmakers in Korea's National Assembly have agreed to hold a full and thorough investigation into last month's Seoul ferry disaster. The 90-day probe will begin on Monday. A plenary session of the National Assembly passed a proposal by an overwhelming majority of 224 out of 226 participating lawmakers, with 2 abstentions. The agreement comes after days of wrangling between rival parties over whether to include specific names of witnesses in the joint proposal. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have been demanding the inclusion of Presidential Chief of Staff Kim Ki-chun. The ruling Centre Party insisted on leaving the selection of witnesses to a special parliamentary committee. And as a compromise, the two sides agreed to subject presidential office officials to the probe, with the head Kim Ki-chun being required to report to hearings.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about... Last month's deadly ferry disaster is casting a dark cloud over Korea's still weak economic recovery. Newly released figures for April show the effect is being felt across all industries here in Korea. Hwang Jie reports.
The sunken Sewol ferry disaster threatens to wreck Korea's fragile economic recovery. Statistics Korea said Friday that output across all industries dropped 0.5% in April from a month ago. The agency said the drop is largely being seen in the service industry, which includes the leisure and lodging sector, reflecting lackluster domestic demand brought on by the disaster. Service sector production dropped 1% from the previous month, while retail sales were down more than 1.5%. The nation's industrial output, which is less affected by the ferry disaster, managed to grow 0.1% last month, but still lower than a near 1% rise in March. The agency said the gain in the production in the mining, manufacturing, and gas industries was led by strong exports of automobiles and mobile phones, and with business sentiment among Korean manufacturers dropping for the first time in May this year to 79 from 82 in April, experts say the outlook doesn't look so good either. The Bank of Korea, which releases the monthly survey, says the slowing Chinese economy and strengthening won soured business sentiment. A reading below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
Now to some good news for people who own a smartphone, because buffering and waiting a few minutes or even 10 minutes or something like that for something to download may be consigned to the past in Korea. In just a few years' time, the country's largest mobile operator, SK Telecom, says it will commercialize a 5th generation or 5G mobile network by the year 2020. This will be the first of its kind in the world. The president of the telecommunications operator, Ha Sung-min, says the 5G network will offer a communication speed 1,000 times faster than the current 4G system. This means users will be able to download an entire movie in just 1 second. The SK Telecom official also said the mobile communication provider will open a new era of so-called ICT-nomics based on the 5G network. He says information and communication technology will become the center of the economy by organically connecting people to all things. And the evolution of mobile messaging over the past few years has been nothing short of staggering. It quickly jumped from basic messages and emoticons to free international calls and mobile banking. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports on what we can expect next.
Koreans usually express their congratulations to newlyweds by giving them cash gifts enclosed in an envelope. However, this tradition may change with the evolution of mobile messengers, which now offers the newest feature of financial services. Korea's #1 mobile messenger, Kakao, introduced a way for users to trade stocks in February, called Stocks Plus Kakao, and said they'd be able to conduct money transfers through an application in the latter half of this year. Users can deposit about $490 into their Kakao bank wallet and can transfer up to $89 a day to their acquaintances. The service is expected to be widely used by Koreans for common acts such as sending gifts of condolence or congratulations to their family and friends. Users can then transfer the received money straight into their personal banking account the next day. Kakao is just one example of how the evolution of mobile messengers is expected to pave a new tradition and way of social exchange. It may even rival existing platforms like internet banking and home trading systems for stocks. Here in Korea, home to some of the world's most tech-savvy consumers, 8 out of 10 people use their smartphones to do some of their banking. The Bank of Korea says the number of smartphone banking users exceeded 40 million this year for the very first time. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Beauty and cosmetic products are no longer solely the preserve of women. The male skincare market is booming, and it's Asian men spending the most. Data compiled by market research firm Euromonitor shows the Asia-Pacific region accounted for 64% of the $3.3 billion market last year. China had the largest share at about $975 million, with Korea sitting in second place at $635 million. When it comes to per-person spending, Korea easily topped the list. Korean men spent just over $25 on skincare last year, which is triple that of Danish men, who came in second on the list. The heavy consumption among Korean men is attributed to male celebrities advertising skincare products. Achieving peace and prosperity anywhere in the world is a tall task, and Asia is no different. Decades-old historical and territorial disputes continue to fuel tensions between the major players in the region, and for discussions on ways to ensure that all nations get along, world leaders and experts have gathered on Korea's resort island of Jeju for a 3-day peace forum. Arirang News' Connie Kim has the story.
Under this year's theme of Designing New Asia, the 9th Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity kicked off Thursday. At the opening ceremony, former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard and former Chinese Foreign Minister Li Jiaoxing called for rising conflicts in the region to be resolved peacefully, including the North Korea issue.
The new leader, Kim Jong-un, comes across as both dangerous and erratic. It is important that China and others in the region explain to their neighbours the pace and scope of their military modernisation to build confidence and trust.
China's rise in power and its territorial disputes in the East and South China Seas were the focus during a discussion that followed the opening ceremony.
The rise of powerful nations in the West came at the expense of other countries. As a peace-loving nation, China has never sought to invade other countries. The progress and development realized by China came peacefully.
Regarding its territorial disputes, the former foreign minister said China had sovereignty over the areas.
There is free navigation in the South China Sea, so we always welcome this. However, interfering in the territory is unfair behavior. We need to resolve this through diplomacy.
For peace to be realized in Asia, the speakers agreed that regional economic partnerships and free trade pacts were positive ways to enhance cooperation and diffuse tensions. Amid a number of territorial and historical conflicts in the region, world leaders and experts have gathered to discuss ways to resolve the differences for the sake of peace and prosperity. Connie Kim, Arirang News, Jeju.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this afternoon. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the News Centre.
Eunice, Ukraine's new president has issued a statement following the country's worst loss of life for government forces after rebels shot down an army helicopter.
That's right, Jinju. President-elect Petro Poroshenko said this was a moment of deep sorrow, extending his condolences to the families of those 14 killed. According to Ukraine's Union news agency, he called the rebels who have claimed responsibility for the attack bandits and enemies of the Ukrainian people who will not go unpunished. The helicopter was carrying National Guard soldiers and an army general for a troop rotation. In a separate development, diplomatic talks are reported to be underway between representatives of Ukraine, Russia, and the EU in Berlin to resolve a growing dispute over Moscow's gas supplies to Kiev. The U.S. intelligence office has countered claims by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, who said he had on multiple occasions raised issue with the spy agency's surveillance program before leaking state secrets to the media. The National Security Agency said the only contact it found with Snowden was a brief email inquiry about legal authorities related to training materials. The NSA's statement follows Snowden's first TV interview with a U.S. network, during which he told Brian Williams he had raised complaints in writing and verbally to supervisors about the NSA's broad collection of electronic data. The 30-year-old fugitive also underlined he has no relationship with the Russian government, never passed on intelligence documents, nor received any money from the Kremlin, though he had been in hiding in Russia now for nearly a year. Pakistan's leader is speaking out about a stoning death of a woman for refusing an arranged marriage that has shocked the world. Farzana Parveen was 3 months pregnant when she was stoned by her family members in a so-called honor killing in front of a court in Lahore. She and her chosen husband were there to contest a related court case. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif called the killing totally unacceptable and ordered the Chief Minister of Punjab province to submit a report immediately. According to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, there were more than 800 such honor killings in the country last year. And marking a significant setback, the people behind the hunt for missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 admitted they have been scouring the wrong region. Australian authorities Thursday ruled out the 850 square kilometer area where search crews had been combing the ocean floor for months, where pings had been detected and thought to be a possible crash point. But U.S. experts recently said they do not believe the pings originated from the plane's black box, but possibly from another man-made device. The search for the passenger plane that went missing on March 8th has been halted for now. The next phase is not expected to begin until August. Authorities maintain they are very confident the Boeing 777 was somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean.
Well, many regions had record high temperatures yesterday, with some down south are already dealing with tropical nights, and it will be hotter today. Though the air is cleaner than it was yesterday in most regions, but in the southeast and on Jeju, the fine dust levels remain high. And with plenty of sunshine, the UV level will also continue to be high today, so please have your sun protection ready before heading out. And it seems like this hot and sunny condition will persist throughout the weekend. Now, Jindo, near the site of ferry accident, should have a mostly sunny day today with calm winds and waves, although currents in the water continue to be strong. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in the capital and Gwangju will rise to 32, while Daegu tops out at 35, and Busan should climb to 27 later on. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju and Dokdo Island should see a high of 28. Daejeon will reach 32, while Mount Keungang tops out at 22. Well, that's all for me this week. Take good care of your health and have a wonderful weekend.
those are the news stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I will be back at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching.